Okay, folks, it is 6 o'clock. It is Tuesday, June the 8th, 2022. We're in the council chambers of the city of Platteville, and I am calling the regular meeting of the Common Council to order. We'll start with roll call. Candace.
Kathy Kopp.
Here.
Jason Arts.
Here.
Lynn Parrott.
Here.
Todd Casper.
Here.
Barbara Doss.
Here.
Ken Killian.
Here.
Eileen Nichols.
Here. Okay, the first thing on our agenda then tonight is a presentation from Johnson and Block on our 2021 audit. So Nicola, or who are you introducing or anything?
Well, I think you're all familiar with Brent. I guess not everybody, since there are some new council members here, but our auditors are Johnson and Block, and the partner on our audit is Brent Nelson. And Brent is here tonight to present the draft 2021 financial statements and audit report. So thank you, Brent.
Thanks, Nicola. And good evening, everyone. As Nicola said, Brent Nelson, I'm an audit partner with Johnson Block out of our Mineral Point office. Here presenting the 2021 financial highlights. So I'm looking at the year end of December 31st, 2021. I did see in the board or the council packet that a full copy of the draft went out. I have a copy of that with me, but I was going to keep it pretty high level tonight. If you have any questions on that draft, that full draft that went out, but it can be an intimidating document, being 70, 80 pages, whatever it is. So I was going to keep it pretty high level tonight, but feel free to interrupt with any questions or I'll save time at the end. And I did pass out hard copies if it's easier to follow along with the PowerPoint. So right now we're in the finalization process of completing the 2021 audit. It is still in a draft format. We're looking to finalize that this week. We're planning on issuing, where we will be issuing unmodified opinions. So what's better known as a clean opinion. So basically, we believe the financial statements that we're issuing that include the city's financial statements will be materially correct in accordance with accounting standards. The scope of our audit included all activities of the city. It included the general fund, the utility, TIF districts, all the 15 plus funds that the city has. So all that was within the scope of our audit. Before we went final, we did send out that draft. So before we finalize anything, we have management review that, and actually the council has the opportunity to look at that, provide any feedback if there are any comments. In addition to the audit, there's a couple of regulatory reports we do on the city's behalf. There's the water utility report that goes to the Public Service Commission. So it's something new last year was that the sewer utility deregulated. So there used to be a full set of schedules required for the sewer utility. There is some sewer utility activity because it's a combined utility that shows up in that report, but less than there otherwise would have been with that deregulation. Then there's a municipal financial report that goes to the Department of Revenue that we help the city with annually. Some additional audit work that we're going to have to do, as like last year with the amount of federal funds flowing through the city. The threshold for what's called a single audit, additional compliance work, is $750,000. So if the city, if any municipal or any governmental unit receives over $750,000 in federal dollars that flow through, it triggers what's called a single audit. And the city didn't have to have one for multiple years. Last year it did with all the routes to recovery money and the COVID relief. And then again this year, and probably for the foreseeable future. So we'll be looking to wrap that up summer, fall. So that's does apply again for 2021. Just some financial highlights, the governmental funds. So across the board, all the 15 funds of the city showed a overall increase in fund balance of about $959,000. So broken down at the fund level, general fund increased about $70,000. So overall, fairly flat, I'd say a pretty flat year. Where we saw the biggest swing is in that capital projects fund. So what happens, there was a borrowing in September 2021 of about $2 million. So that money wasn't all spent by December 31st. And I'm assuming that's been spent down significantly here in 2022. So in 2021, it shows a big increase in fund balance. In 2022, you'll probably be the reverse.
Yeah, I'll just let the council know that a lot of that was to do with the Highway 151 project that didn't complete.
Then some other notable funds that had some bigger increases. The airport increased over 100,000 in 2021. And then TIF district number 7 increased about 60,000. So that's right downtown here. And that, I think, if you're not aware, it gets a lot of support from TIF district number 5. So had that support from TIF number 5 not come, you wouldn't be looking at a surplus there. But with that increment sharing, it does show a surplus. Overall budget to actual, we have an audit schedule on that we're required to submit. And there were favorable results. So the revenues exceeded budget and the expenditures were less than budget. So nothing significantly over under budget there. And then on the utility side of things, the utility, water and sewer utility, it's combined utility had a net increase in fund or net position of about 800,000. So I'll just focusing in on the general fund because that gets the most attention. Is a 5-year trend of the general fund balance. So as of December 31st, 2021, dating us back to as far back to 2017, and just a line graph to see how that's trended with the city. There's different classifications of fund balance. There's non-spendable, restricted, assigned, and then what gets the most attention is that unassigned portion. Non-spendable, it is what it sounds like. It's not money sitting in the bank. You can't go spend it. So it's part of fund balance, but we have to show it separately. Restricted and assigned, those are either internally or externally restricted for how that money will be used. Unassigned is where we look at more that discretionary spending that the city can use it as it deems fit. So just looking at that unassigned fund balance, it has been trending right around that 3 million range. Overall, the total fund balance, other general fund, has been trending upward here the last couple of years. I just had one more graph just to kind of dig into that a little bit. The city does have a fund balance policy where it wants its unassigned fund balance to be. And they set that at a common benchmark I see is about 20% of annual expenditures. Comparing that to actual, so the graph shows that 20% on the bottom, and then the last 5 years where the city has fallen on that unassigned. And you can see unassigned fund balance is certainly in compliance with that minimum policy set by the city. At the 20% is the board or the council policy, and it's about 37%, so well above that threshold. Just a graph looking at general fund revenues. The biggest revenue source of the general fund is intergovernmental aid. So that's mostly your state aids coming through, followed by tax revenue is that biggest piece, the other biggest piece of the pie. Those two alone make up over 85% of the general fund revenue. There are some lesser revenues from public charges for services, things of that nature. Just a couple of highlights, things that stood out to me. You know, you'll see the tax revenue went up. That's not all property taxes. The biggest component of that was that room taxes. And kind of a theme comparing numbers this year compared to last year, 2021 being this year and 2020, is that room tax revenues were well down in 2020, not just for Platteville, across the board with COVID. So that wasn't property tax increases, all of that, you know, part of that, majority of that's going to be room taxes there. And then there was some federal aid that came through. Intergovernmental aids was about 4.1 million in 2020. Compared to about 3.8 million in 2021. And that was some of that immediate COVID relief that came in 2020, that routes to recovery. Just on the expense side of things is the next table. Public safety is the biggest component of the general fund expenses, representing about 36% of total expenses. So that's your police, your fire, your building inspector, things of that nature, followed by leisure activities. So that's your parks and recs, your pool, things like that. Leisure activities, like you'd expect, was impacted by COVID the most, with limited activities available for, you know, pool and things like that. So you'll see the expenses go up, but that makes sense why we're seeing that across the board for all municipalities. And just to switch gears I focused in on the general fund, but looking at the utility as a 5-year trend, revenues, less expenses, arriving at that net income number on the far right. from 2017 to 2019, net income was exceeded 900,000. 2020 profitability was down. You'll see revenues were down, about 300,000. Expenses actually went up. So the profitability went from say over a $900,000 net income down to about $500,000. A big driver of that, with public authority revenue was way down in the utilities with the school closing, the university having limited on-site presence. So some of those things went back to where the levels they were in prior years. As far as the utility breakdown, how much is wastewater versus how much is water, it's about a 50-50 split. Just if you're curious, because that $5 million in revenue for 2021, that's a combined water and sewer number. Sewer rates were increased in the fall of 2021 by about 5%. And then in April here of this year, the water utility increased its rates. So none of that water utility increase that the city just went, none of that is reflected in these numbers, but they will. I am expecting revenues to edge higher next year. So those seem like big net incomes, over 900,000. Why are we increasing rates? But what's not included is things like principal payments on the debt. I just list that long-term debt principal payments exceeded 800,000 for 2021. And there's capital purchases. So there's things of that nature that don't show up as expenses that either get depreciated over multiple years. So big net incomes don't necessarily mean rates don't have to be adjusted. Just looking at the long-term debt that the city still has on the books or beginning of the year. So governmental activities, that's going to be your TIF districts, your general fund, your street work, your storm sewer work. Entering the year, 20,500,000 and bonds outstanding just for on the governmental side of things. There are some tax increment revenue bonds. So those are what they're TIF district related, but they're not backed up by the taxing authority of the city. As collateral, the banks or whoever the investors are, except that the TIF districts has the revenues to support that without the taxing power of the city. So there was one new borrowing in September of 2021 of that 1.975 million, which about evened out with the required debt payments on the old debt. So really long-term debt on the governmental side didn't change all that much. Business type activities is your utility side of things. So that'd be your water and sewer utility. There was you'll see $6.8 million of new debt issued, about 5.8. And what that was that there was the big refinancing, restructuring of debt in the fall, which was done to save significant amount of interest. So there looks like there's a big fluctuation, but we have to show that new revenue as proceeds, I think it was almost $5 million, and then take off the old debt. So it looks like the majority of that's that refinancing going on there. State statutes do set a limit on how much debt a municipality can issue, and they set that at 5% of the equalized value of property within the municipality. So for the city, that's about $38 million where the state will cap you on how much debt you can issue, general obligation debt. Comparing that to where the city actually is at about a little over 20 million. So there is some capacity there for more borrowings if the city ever decided to go in that direction. Just some overall conclusions. City has a healthy fund balance, as the graph showed. Have debt capacity should the need ever arise here in the next couple of years. Utility revenues return to normalcy here in 2021, which is good to see. We're seeing that across the state. And then those new water rates will take effect here, or they're starting to show up on 2022. Appreciate all the help that the city personnel provided during the process. Received complete cooperation from everyone. That process is going really well. So any questions from anyone?
Okay, does anybody have any questions of Brent on the audit? Then we'll look forward to the draft into a final. And having that shared, I think you always share documents with us then at the final. And so we'll have those later. But again, thank you to Johnson Block and thank you to our staff for their diligence. Not just one day a year or 1 week a year, but 52 weeks a year to be able to get to this stage. So, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on then to consideration of the consent agenda. The following items may be approved on a single motion and vote due to routine nature. I am looking for something that Colette provided for me, if I can find it on my desk. We have the council minutes from June 14th that were in your packet. We have payment of bills, appointments to boards and commissions, and I have that somewhere too. Too many papers tonight, guys. Just way too many papers. So tonight I am appointing Fallon Zimmerman to the Commission on Aging, and I am reappointing the members of the Tourism Committee to another one-year term. That's Terry Malliot, Mike Bretner, Deb Rice, and Deb Jenny. So those are the appointments for tonight. As far as licenses go, there are temporary Class B licenses in your packet. The first to Roundtree Gallery for an event that will be held at Roundtree Gallery on July 21st, Coloring and Craft Brews. The second temporary Class B for Roundtree Gallery. This will be held actually in City Park, the Tiffany Lang Artist Reception. Class B for Main Street on August 27th, Chalk and Cheese, that's held in City Park. A change of agent of the combination beer and alcohol license for the Quick Trip right here on Water Street to Kimberly Davis, and the 1- and 2-year operator licenses to serve and sell alcohol that were in your packet. Additionally, we have a street closing permit for North Bonson and Cart Streets between Main and Irving Streets for the Platteville Night Market, Saturday, July 16th, and a resolution 22-13, application for exemption from the Leone County Library tax. That resolution prevents the city of Platteville from double taxation for library services. So do I have a motion?
Move we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Nichols. Motion carries.
Okay, citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, if any. I have had nobody submit a green sheet, but I will call on Councilwoman Kopp first to for a public service announcement.
Well, thank you, Barb. Just want to tout all the activities that are going to be happening in the city on Monday, the 4th of July. Hopefully, a majority of you are going to be here. We got a full days of activities, starting out with the Clearbank 5K walk run that's going to start at the museum, which is typical. Registration's at 7:30, cost is only $10. You register on site that day, and the proceeds of that walk run benefit the fireworks. Then the Mining and Royal Jameson Museums will be hosting their traditional Heritage Days from 9 to 4. All the typical awesome things going on there that they do. Plus, I want to note that you can do a mine tour and train rides all day that day. And then at 10 o'clock in the morning, we have the veterans have a patriotic program in City Park. And significantly this year, we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of the dedication of the Veterans Memorial. I believe that's been 10 years, but it has. Then at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, well, actually 3:30, we moved to Legion Field. There again, there's going to be something for everybody. JCs are going to have their beanbag tournament starting at 3:30. They have a beer garden. The Platteville Veterans Honor Roll is going to be running the food stand beginning at 4 o'clock. Family Connections is hosting a kids zone with all kinds of activities for the kids from 4 to 8:30. Then at 7:30 to 9, we have live music by Adam Bartels. The national anthem will be sung at 9 o'clock, and then we have fireworks at dusk. Just asking people to bring your lawn chairs, your blankets, come on out and make it a great day. We are still accepting donations, and we still could use a few volunteers. So if anybody's got even an hour of free time, we definitely could use you. So, but hope to see a lot of you in town on Monday.
Thank you, Kathy. And it's always a good time. Yeah.
Pardon?
Will there be ice cream at the museum?
Best Province ice cream truck will be there
Whoa.
at Legion Field at 4
Oh, at
by
Legion
6
Field.
o'clock. Yes.
And the music boosters will probably have ice cream at the museum. That's what they generally, unless it's Best Row. Yeah. All right. Second, another citizens' observations, comments, and petitions. I'm going to call on Howard to talk about an upcoming project meeting discussion. Some of you may have gotten email from residents on Dewey Street. So
Correct.
Howard.
Thank you. On your desk here today is a letter that went out to property owners on Dewey Street for the 2021 project, inviting them to one of two different meetings. We're basically having the same meeting, two different locations on Dewey Street on Wednesday. And so council members are invited if you wish to attend.
So this is Wednesday, July the 6th.
Wednesday, July the
First-
6th.
The first meeting is at 5 o'clock at
5
the corner of Dewey and Jefferson.
Correct.
And the second meeting is at 6 o'clock at the corner of Dewey and North Court.
That's correct.
Okay, and all the residents along Dewey Street who were affected by last year's street water and sewer project have had notice of this meeting.
The letters are in
Are in
today's mail.
Okay,
On the back of your sheet is the list of the addresses and names of people who are getting those notices.
okay.
Are there some concerns
Uh,
from the
Some
residents?
citizens have expressed concerns regarding that project, and we're going to talk about those at the meetings.
At either meeting we can come to.
That's correct.
Okay, and also under citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, a couple of council people have been approached about how do you get a referendum on a ballot? And so I actually asked Adam to talk about that process. Basically, the council could, if we were discussing something like this, we could ourselves schedule a referendum on a topic that we were discussing. So if we were discussing like, oh, should we, I don't know, should we put a cover over the top of City Park? We want to, put a big tarp over the, and we were talking about that. And then we thought, well, would citizens really like that or not? We could put our own referendum on the ballot of
Correct.
something we've been talking about. In this case, it's citizens that have come forward and said, I have this thing I would like to get on the ballot. So the breakdown of how that begins, it's actually a process outlined in state statute. So when I was approached, I said, I felt it would probably be almost like running for council. You would get your wording, you would get your petition wording together, and then you would circulate that among registered voters in the city of Platteville, and you would obtain a number of signatures. And Adam has discovered that statute calls for 15% of the votes cast in the city for governor in the last election. So in this case, there were 4,392 votes cast for governor. last time. So 15% would be 659 signatures. And they would have to be signatures of people who are residents of the city of Platteville, not just signatures of people in general, but signatures of people. And then there's timelines and things. So I've distributed that. So if you have people who ask you about that, that would be how you get a referendum, how as a citizen, I would get a referendum question on the ballot. Yeah, I can't remember a time during my tenure on the council, maybe Eileen can or Ken, I don't think we've ever had a city referendum, an actual city referendum on the ballot. Maybe the last one was when they accepted the Rollo Jameson collection. I mean, it might have been that long ago. Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, we've had referendum on the ballot from the school district in terms of a building referendum, but not of a different nature. So that's why I didn't really know, but I thought it would be instructive for everybody to have that process in front of them and to help our citizens in terms of if they have questions about how that can happen. All right, let us then move on to the reports. In the packet, we had the Tourism Committee report. Lynn? Are you on the tourism? I didn't think so. Isn't it?
On there anymore.
Well, maybe it is Lynn. Then. Maybe not. It says Lynn,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't there.
Well, that was in January. So
Oh,
you wouldn't have been
Okay.
right. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm assuming there were no comments on that. They meet quarterly, so that was from January.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, Community Safe Routes Committee, Jason.
Nothing to add.
I'll go on to action items then. First of those action items is resolution 22-14, providing for the sale of approximately $2.72 million of water and sewer system revenue bonds, series 2022B.
Right.
Right.
So we have our municipal advisor, representative from Ellis, which is Brian Wilmer, who's our expert on all things utilities. But before I hand over to him, I just wanted to point out a couple of things here. First of all, you may or may not have remembered that we had initially estimated that we would be borrowing about $4 million this year for water and sewer projects. And that was because it included, the budget included $1.35 million for standby generator project. Due to complexities, I think largely from COVID.
Supply chain.
Yeah. So COVID-related supply chain issues, that project is being delayed. And so that has considerably reduced the size of this bond issue down to the 2.7 million that's in the staff note. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is that you may recall that early in the year, when the contract bids were being considered for these projects, the Cedar Street project and the West Main Street Culvert project, the utility portion of those projects came in over budget. And at that time, the council approved staff's recommendation that ARPA funds be used to cover those overages. But in total, the overages only amount to, I should say only, it's still a significant amount of money, about $200,000. But in the scope of the overall utility CIP and bond issue of 2.7 million, that 200,000 does not have a huge impact on the debt service on this bond issue. And so staff is recommending that overage for those two projects be included in this bond issue, which would thereby release the 200,000 of ARPA funds for something else that the city might need to use that for without having to do a borrow on whatever that might be. So that is already included in here. And at the next council meeting, we'll be bringing forward for action two items to amend those two motions back from when those contracts were awarded, essentially so that the council could amend how those projects will be funded, including using the bond funds. Now, if those items come up for action at the next meeting and the council says, you know what, we don't want to change that. We want to use the ARPA funds and we don't want to increase this borrow. That's okay. You can authorize this borrow today, and then you could, it would just mean that the bond issue size would decrease a little bit, but that's not a problem. So just wanted to full disclosure, all of that. And with that, I'll hand over to Brian. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicola. And thank you all for having me tonight. As she indicated, we're here to talk about the water and sewer issue for 2022. I know in your packet, you all got our packet materials. So that is what I'll be walking through tonight. I'm going to keep it relatively straightforward because nothing really has changed in terms of the previous borrowings that we've done the past couple of years. But that said, if you turn to the executive summary, the par amount that you'd be authorizing, kind of the green light for the process tonight, understand that the sale will not happen until August. But in terms of saying, all right, we're going to go out to market this debt, is 2.72 million. And this is water and sewer system revenue bonds. So you're pledging revenues of the water and sewer system. These are not general obligation debt. As Brent indicated, you have a limit in terms of how much general obligation debt you have. So the utilities often then will borrow on a revenue pledge so that you do not hit that GO borrowing limit. In addition to, they have the net income in order to cover the existing and prospective debt service. So just kind of wanted to make sure you're understanding why we're doing the revenue issue here. Table 1 identifies the projects that you'll be borrowing for. Kind of the rest of this page just identifies some of the regulatory items in terms of issuing debt. But that said, we're doing this with a call feature again, as we always do. We want that financial flexibility in the future to be able to pay the debt service early in the instance that you might find lower rates like we did last year in 2021. So that said, we are going to get this, as it says at the bottom of page 1, rated again, and that'll become important as I'll discuss it in terms of the structuring of this debt and then the use of cash in order to offset any of the potential projects that you're borrowing for. So just understand that, we're looking to get this rated. We expect the rating to remain the same. On the next page, understand that our basis of recommendation is based off of the financial situation of the water and sewer utility. As Brent just outlined, it's good news there. The university was open, so your revenues are back up to where they were before. In addition to that, you've had increases now to both the sewer and the water utility that actually sewer, you'll see a full effect 2022 revenues. Water, you won't see till 2023 of a full year of an impact on those rates. But that said, good news for the utilities in terms of kind of returning to that revenue level and then the ability to take on any additional debt service. That said, we'll be looking to sell these bonds competitively each year at the time that we issue the debt and come for sale day. We indicate in terms of the benefit in terms of doing so. You can save hundreds of thousands of dollars by issuing bonds competitively. And that includes the cost of issuance. So you have a rating for a reason. Similar to how you bid your public projects, you want basically what the lowest what the lowest bidder will bid for that day, given that it's the terms that you provide. The remainder of this is structurally how we package the deal, no different than any other year. So if you have questions on premium or discount bids or anything like that, I can certainly take those. But in the essence of time, I'll skip past that, as we're really not changing course in terms of how we've issued in the past. That said, on page 3, just want an understanding that we have reviewed all your existing debt and we didn't see any opportunities for any refundings this time. There's a little bit of market increase this year, when we've come out of the COVID valley, if you will, in terms of interest rates, and those interest rates have started to climb. As you probably are aware, the Fed is trying to track with inflation, make sure we don't spike into a recession. So that said, Those interest rates have been on the rise. I do have a table on that later. But beyond that, there's really no other news to report contextually within this report. So I'll go to the schedule, which is on table 5 or page 5, excuse me. So we're here tonight to greenlight this process, June 28th. Then we'll be looking to produce that official statement that we do on behalf of the city, and then ultimately look to distribute that official statement August 1st. In addition, we'll be having a conference with the rating agency, which coincidentally, we actually scheduled today. So that'll be later in July. Again, we don't expect any real changes with that rating agency, and I'll kind of go over why in the future on these future tables. And then the sale will be August 9th. So that's when we'll find out our interest rate. We'll take the bids that morning, and we typically, offer that to the lowest bidder in terms of whomever bids on the bonds. That said, you can expect to receive monies September 1st, 2022 in order to pay for the projects and or reimburse yourselves for the projects if you spent up until that date. So that said, we got our contact information there. If you do have questions, never hesitate to reach out, but I'll go into the tables. The next page, table 1, just identifies the projects. This has been part of the budget process, so I'm really not going to spend time on this, but if you're curious as to what projects you're borrowing for and for how much, how they're split between water and sewer, you can take a look at this page. And again, this is only your CIP for this bond issue. You, of course, have a more robust multi-year plan that we go over in terms of the financial planning process, typically later in the year. On the next page, this just identifies the sources and uses. So saying, all right, we need to borrow for these funds. When you issue revenue debt, there is a debt service reserve requirement. And so that changes as you issue debt. So there's about 90,000 in order to make sure that reserve requirement is ample. And then there's estimated issuance expenses, our fees, bond counsel's fees, the rating fee, and then there's the underwriter's discount on revenue bonds. We are seeing, you may have recognized, we typically estimate about 12.5, but they are increasing in terms of how they're structuring these, and I think it's a protection in terms of what the interest rate environment is, making sure there's protections against their potential investors on the secondary market while they hold those bonds for a couple days. And then the paying agent, and you guys use paying agent if you do have term bonds, as that's recommended because there's special notices that will go out. So these are the estimated expenses. We would see, a change there. We like to be conservative, of course. And then with that said, you get to your bond size ultimately at the bottom of the 2.72 million. The one note that I would highlight is I did show cash available as 0, meaning you're not applying any cash to downsize this debt. In the FMPs, if you remember, when we go through the long range plan, we had kind of shown about 200 or 400,000 over each issue going for the next 5 years. After discussion with staff and then reviewing the rating report, although the rating agency didn't see any downward pressure, they do mention that if unrestricted cash goes down, they would look at, potential rating changes, in as well as looking to save funds for when interest rates become higher and the cost of borrowing becomes greater. So ultimately, that's where we made our decision to not apply any cash to this borrowing, but maybe save it where we've heard from the Fed about 50 times now that this trend of increasing the rates is going to go higher. I do think municipal securities will still be safe, certainly if we do hit a recession. That flight to liquidity and flight to safety often happens. So with that said, I don't think we'll have the same spike that we've had February through April continuing this summer, but I will say it'll probably go up. So I'll get to that on my last table. The next table, table 3, is an identification of just kind of how we structured this for the water and sewer portions. I like to blow this up so you can understand what we're doing in terms of our recommended structure. And more or less that's due to the table on the next page. So I'll actually go there, but I know the table on the next page can be small. So I wanted to identify basically how we're structuring this. So table 4 is kind of the all important table. you'll see if you have, I believe you all have color copies. The first, 3 color sections, blue, green, then orange, those are measures of revenue debt coverage. And what that is, your ability to take on new debt. So you actually pledge in each revenue bond resolution that you cannot issue debt if your net revenues are below 1.25. So it's called the additional bond test. And as well as you're also pledging that each year to these bondholders, your net revenues will be 1.25. So not only at the time of issuance do we want to show that this is okay, but going into the future. So we take your existing debt, your proposed debt, we take those net revenues and we run this coverage test. This wasn't as pretty, if you may remember from last year, the refunding helped save money. So that certainly helped things. But given, those 2020 numbers without the university having those revenues, it certainly wasn't as pretty, specifically on the sewer side. The sewer has a little bit more debt than the water. But as Brent mentioned and as indicated here, the net income is about 50-50. So just kind of understand why the coverage is lower on the sewer. But ultimately, you're pledging both utilities. So you look at it on a combined basis, and that's the third, color of columns, the orange, title, if you will. So that said, in terms of the additional bonds tests, we're good at 1.6 and above. In addition to that, the S&P, your rating agency, looks at an all-in or robust coverage. And they do that with including the pilot payment. So the water utility pays taxes to the general fund as a payment in lieu in taxes. And that's about $400,000 as of 2021. And so we want to make sure that if we're issuing this debt, that we're structuring it so that it doesn't hurt your rating with S&P, of course. So they like that minimum to be 1.6. And so ultimately, when we're balancing, we want our rating to remain the same, but we also want to amortize this debt as quickly as possible to reduce our interest costs. That's why you'll see kind of this structure. We're trying to balance those two items and get to our recommended structure. So there you'll kind of see where we get to that 1.6 in terms of the future, projected minimum. That said, you'll note I'm pretty conservative in terms of future pilot costs. We're also conservative in terms of projected net revenues. We don't show any increase in revenue after these, initial 2021 and 2022 increases kick in. So with that, we would say if you do kind of more inflationary increases, the 3%, now 4.5% simplifieds that the PSC offers, 3% or something inflationary with the sewer to kind of keep up with those operating expenses. I would really pay attention to the table that Brent provided. Historically, we've done that same thing in the FMP, but your operating expenses are increasing. So it's important to stay on top of those things, because the second you have a big project, all of a sudden you have a large 20% increase, and we would call that rate shock. So you want to make sure that you're kind of keeping up with inflation. So that said, presumably you would be doing that for the next 20 years. We don't show it just to kind of show how we structured this. So that said, ultimately pretty conservative in terms of those projected net revenues when we're looking at the S&P coverage, and you can understand the balancing act that we did to get to our structure. The last point that I'll make on this presentation would be the last page of our packet, which just identifies the estimated interest rate that we've had here. Again, I'll point you to the right, maybe fifth of this chart, January 2022 through May of 2022. We've certainly seen a spike in rates. This has been, the fastest acceleration that we've seen in the last 5 years. So we want to make sure that we're kind of conservative in terms of these estimated interest rates. So I just kind of pointed out in terms of what our pre-sale estimate was at about 5%. And that's over the time. You'll note that, your actual interest rates are fixed, but they go up over time to kind of follow that yield curve for bond investors. So that said, the overall true interest cost of about 5.078 we believe is, probably a little conservative, but that said, the sales in 6 weeks, if we see the 20-point basis jumps each week, you would be right at that point. So that's ultimately how we landed there. You can see it's tapered off a little bit here in May. we're going to hope that, we don't keep climbing that fast and that there's more of a plateau here, but I would expect it's going to be, probably closer to 4.25. You can only do it.
You can hold you to it.
Yeah. So with that, I'll take any questions. I do have extra packets if anybody needs as well.
Okay, questions on this resolution 22-14, providing for the sale of approximately $2.72 million in water and sewer system revenue bonds. A lot of numbers. A lot of numbers.
How many years to pay this off? That's a big question.
Sure. So revenue bonds, you can do up to 40, truthfully, but these we tend to structure around 20. And this one, ultimately the water, we can do what we did for 12 years. You had a bit more flexibility there in terms of the future coverage. But in terms of the sewer, we structured it for 20 years. So we're structuring around existing debt, but the sewer would be paying off longer than the water. Sewer also has more robust future plans as well.
You can see that demonstrated in the table 3.
Mhm.
And you can see the year over to the left, and then the water principal being paid each year and the sewer principal being paid each year. And you can see how that is curved to have more principal being paid off later for the sewer portion.
How can we pay it off sooner? Charge more to the citizens?
Right. So if you had net revenues that were more robust, so let's say something like closer to $2 per every expense, your cash revenues against cash expenses, and that's inclusive of the pilot payment of about $2 to every expense, $2 of revenues to every expense. We would be amortizing this quicker. We want to make sure that you're paying less in interest. But again, I think S&P, that was their biggest concern as they regarded it several times in their report from 2021. Even though you were refunding debt, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars, they still said coverage is basically at our floor in terms of the AA rating. So they don't want you to go lower than 1.6. So if you increase the sewer rates, you could certainly say we may have cash available to pay this back sooner, in terms of you could call, defease the debt at any point after 10 years. That would take a significant amount of cash, or if you had the ability to refinance, you could restructure at that point as well.
A city like Madison, how fast can they pay off? How fast are they paying off?
Sure. It depends on the issue size. They have a lot of growth. So they have a lot of new users coming on as well, in as well as they're not just residential users, right? These are bigger users. They generally generate a lot more economies in terms of the projects that they require to get service there versus the revenues that they'll generate. But that said, they're typically borrowing on a 20-year basis as well. You'll see communities try to shorten that depending on the par amount, though. If it's less dollars that they're borrowing for, they certainly will be issuing less. But that said, they're doing similar things to try to keep their rating as well.
Okay, other questions? Other questions? If not, then are we ready to take action on this resolution 22-14, providing for the sale of these bonds?
Team providing for the sale of approximately $2,720,000 water and sewer system revenue bonds, series 2022B.
Second,
Okay, we have a motion by Eileen and a second by Jason. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes,
Killian,
yes,
Nichols.
Yes.
Motion carries.
thank you.
Thank you.
And we're hoping for really good news in terms of rating. and- Okay. Let's move on to our second and action item, the Compliance Maintenance Annual Report, CMAR 2021. Howard.
Yes. This item, Compliance Maintenance Annual Report for calendar year 2021 is required to be submitted by June 30th to the DNR. It's a self-report on the condition of our treatment plant, the collection system, experience of our operators, and our financial and managerial capacity to run the system. We have an excellent treatment plant operated by exceptional staff. We graded A in all areas. And so we have enclosed a resolution that is required by DNR to demonstrate that you as the Common Council has reviewed this document and approved the submission for this year. The Water and Sewer Commission reviewed and recommends approval.
Okay, questions on the CMAR for 2021? If there are no questions, I would take a motion.
I just have a comment. It's not a question, but congratulations on getting an A. I think that's very significant. So good job.
Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve resolution 22-15, accepting the compliance maintenance annual report for 2021 and authorizing staff to submit the report.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Jason and a second by Lynn to approve resolution 22-15. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nichols.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to our next agenda item. If I could ever get back to a size on my computer here. Is resolution 22-16, the Department of Transportation Transportation Alternative Program grants. Howard.
Yes. Earlier in the year, in January, we submitted TAP grant requests under the normal process. With this bipartisan infrastructure law, there was a second round of TAP grants available to submit. And there are two types of projects that they were looking for specifically for the 2022 funding for this. One would be cost updates to previously submitted projects, and the other would be studies or other non-infrastructure projects. So what we have is the Mountain View Park Trail was one of those projects that we previously submitted back in January. As a result of senior design work, we believe that the cost estimate should be updated. And the other ones that we submitted back in January did not require updates. So that's one project that was submitted under this grant cycle. The other is to do a study, and we are working with Southwest Wisconsin Regional Planning to come up with a pedestrian and bicycle study, a non-motorized transportation study for the entire city. Proposed cost would be $46,000. This would be an 80-20 share. And as I say in here, this is a new request that was not submitted in January, but is allowable under this new BIL funding. If it's approved, we do have the option of refusing grant if we do not believe the study is helpful, or we cannot fund the 20% cost share at roughly $9,200. Normally, grants for these types of infrastructure are not funded unless there's a current planning study like this documenting the need for such infrastructure. So what I've got here is if this is awarded, the city basically pledges in 2022, 9,200 as city cost share for this study. 2023, we updated the design costs, and 2024, we updated the construction costs for the Mound View Park Trail. Now, we also submitted a DNR grant that could cover up to 50% of project costs. And under the previously submitted DNR grant, we submitted 1.69 million, or that could cover up to $845,000 of costs. Since the DNR and DOT funding can match for each other, the city would request the full DOT amount, leaving the $426,000 as the maximum needed from that DNR grant. So the DNR grant would cover the increase in the Mound View Park Trail if we got both grants. So like I say, we do have the option of refusing if those grants are not, if one or both are not awarded. So I have, other spreadsheets to kind of show where all of this funding and everything is, where we went, where we're thinking we're going. And so staff is recommending that we approve resolution 2216 for the Mound View Park Trail and for the non-motorized transportation plan.
Okay, questions of Howard?
A couple of questions. What is the most current pedestrian bicyclist study that we have? How current is it?
2009 Safe Routes to Schools plan.
Okay. So with this new piece, with the request for the study for the 46,000, if we would get that, where would we get the $9,200 for this year? I mean, is that a separate one, or is that covered under
It's not within
everything
the
else? Is
budget.
that a
We would have,
standalone?
it's a standalone. We would have to arrange for funding. I would think that ARPA, that we just juggled money to borrow water and sewer money. I believe that ARPA funding that we hopefully will release back for use could be used to cover this 9,200.
Also look at any contingency accounts as well. So the first thing we'll do is we'll look at the budget to see if there's anywhere where we can, absorb that. And if we can't, then essentially, and again, it's all whether or not we get awarded. So if we get awarded it, we'll have to come up with funding scenarios and then we present that back to you.
But we would have the option to, if it's
Correct.
awarded, it would come back and then we would be told where
Yep.
money could, okay.
Correct.
Or if they can't find the money, then.
Or if they
Then we'll be
can't
telling
find
you, we need more money. And
Yeah,
then you can
okay.
tell us no.
All right, okay.
Now, are you actually expecting this to be in 2022?
What that means is that DOT would sign a contract with regional planning in 2022 to obligate the money under federal rules. And then however long it takes for them to do the study, they're fine. They just need to get the signatures on the documents prior to the fiscal year in order to obligate the money. Then they can pay it out afterwards.
Not much, frankly, for submitting these, there's not much of 2022 left when you have to put it through all these levels of review and people and stuff. So that's why I said, are we even believing that this is possible that they'll get this done in 2022? Okay, so any other questions on these TAP grants? The updates from Mountain View Park were basically due to the leaching or whatever of the roaster.
Roaster
I want
pile.
to call them rooster piles, but I
Yeah,
I
close.
don't think they are rooster piles. I think they're roaster piles. So,
That's one of them. And we were also looking at upgrading
bridge.
costs for the bridge.
for the bridge.
Would the bridge be a new bridge in place, replace the one that is there right now? I believe
That-
there's an old one there, so there are two there right now, correct?
There's a wooden bridge there right now, just off of Mitchell Hollow Road, and that would be replaced under this project here.
But the bridge that vehicles are using, would that be replaced?
Not Mitchell Hollow Road,
No, not the
Not
Mitchell
the-
Hollow
not the road
Road
bridge.
bridge, but if you where the trail crosses Mitchell Hollow Road, immediately on the north side of Mitchell Hollow Road, there's a bridge that goes over the creek / wet areas. Just after you get off the road.
Well, when I read this, it said for a new bridge at Mitchell Hollow Road. So that's not for the road itself.
No, I'm sorry for any confusion.
Well,
on that.
that's the way I read them.
Okay,
Okay, my next question is, are we getting any funding as far as city streets? Our city streets, some of them are becoming like trails, rough. So do we have any money coming up for city streets? We missed out on a couple of them already as far as funding. So do we have any funding coming?
we have not been notified. I had the DOT today send me emails to clarify some of the requests that I submitted at the beginning of June. And so they haven't tossed them in the waste can. So that's about all I can say.
So we did submit projects for the 2023 to 2026 cycle. We approved those before. There were a set of, but you haven't heard about those. The one that we did hear about was the grant funding through the bill, whatever that,
Yeah,
building infrastructure law
Mhm.
that had to do with overlays, and we didn't get that money. And I
Correct.
think
That's
Adam
correct.
submitted or distributed the list of communities where those funds were appropriated in an earlier email. So,
Well, we need money for streets. I look at this and feel that less money should be used for trails. We need to take care of our streets. Thank you.
okay, any other questions? So folks, we have in front of us resolution 22-16 authorizing the city manager to submit applications to DOT's TAP program. Unfortunately, the TAP program doesn't provide money for streets. It is money allocated for other transportation alternatives. And I know, so what's your pleasure?
Guess I'll move with this one. I move to approve resolution 22-16, authorizing the city manager to submit applications to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, in parentheses, WISDOT, for the 2022-2026 Transportation Alternatives Program, in parentheses, TAP award cycle.
Okay, we have a motion
I'll second.
and a second. Todd and Kathy. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
No,
Nichols. Motion carries.
Okay, next on our action agenda and the last item on our agenda, action item on our agenda tonight is the CDBG CV grant Fair Housing Proclamation.
Joe.
Yes, so with the grant that we received for the inclusive playground and related projects, since it's federal money, they always have additional requirements that come with that. One of those is that the community has to undertake actions to promote fair housing and enhance fair housing activities in the community. So one of those actions is the adoption of this fair housing proclamation. I think we probably approved the same one the last grant we got, but like I said, it's a requirement of the grant. Any questions?
Any questions? Do I hear a motion?
To approve the Fair Housing Proclamation.
Okay, motion by Eileen, second by Lynn to approve the Fair Housing Proclamation. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot, Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, as noted, that was the last action item on our agenda tonight. We'll move on to information and discussion items. The first, short-term financing for airport hangar project. Nicola.
So the airport receives annual entitlement funding from the FAA through the State Bureau of Aeronautics. And that entitlement funding has to be used for certain kinds of approved projects. And we don't typically, the airport itself, the airport fund does not receive those funds usually. In past years, it would be allocated by the state and pay towards the projects that the state would approve. So as part of that, back in 2019 and early 2020, as the Airport Commission was considering future projects, one of the things that was discussed was a new hangar. And you may recall that in 2021, in March of 2021, to be precise, this idea was presented to the council of building a hangar that would be funded through entitlement funding. It was delayed because of COVID in 2020. Otherwise, it would have been brought forward sooner. But at that time, it was anticipated that it would take 3 to 4 years for the airport to receive enough entitlement allocations to pay for the hangar. And so because of that, the airport came forward to present to the council a request to borrow funding until those annual entitlements were assigned to the airport. Now, the project did go out for bid. That process was managed by the state back in 2021, but the bids on the project were much higher than the commission's target at that time. So this was a matter of kind of like pricing shock that was a result of the rapid increase in pricing at that time after or during the latter part of the pandemic. So at that time, the commission elected to rebid the project rather than accept the lowest bid at that time. So the project was rebid this year in this spring. And at the same time, Congress passed the BIL, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that you just heard about. And so BIL funds are now being allocated to qualifying municipal airport projects in addition to the entitlement funds. So what this has meant is, even though the lowest bid was still high comparative to prior to the pandemic, the airport has now the opportunity to pay for the hangar project through these BIL funds and entitlement funds at a much faster rate. So it's now anticipated that the airport would only need a short-term financing option to cover project invoices that will be coming to the city in 2023. So rather than a 3 to 4 year borrow, it's now looking at a short-term 1 year borrow. So at the June 13th Airport Commission meeting, the commission voted to accept the lowest bid, which was $957,000, but contingent on council approval of a short-term borrow. The total project costs, including engineering, are estimated at 1.18 million. The project will be managed by the state. And what you have in the attachment to the staff note here is a projection of how the funds might flow. And I'm just going to walk you through that and then answer any questions that you might have. So the total cost for the hangar project is estimated at $1.18 million, and that estimate comes from the Bureau of Aeronautics. The airport already has entitlement funds on hand, if you like, held by the state that are allocated to the airport and have accrued over the last few years. So airports are able to kind of accumulate these entitlement funds over years to put towards a big project, but after several years, they will expire. So there is a time limit on how long airports can accumulate these funds. So current entitlements accumulated at $432,782. And then there is a local match that has to be paid by the airport, which is 10% of the total project costs. So that estimated $118,000. The airport already has sufficient cash to pay that 10% match. So after the 10% match and the current entitlements are applied, the adjusted amount that would be needed would be $629,000 and change. Now there's 2022 BIL funds that will be allocated to the airport, estimated at $159,000. And those would be paid in Q1 of 2023. And the Bureau is estimating that the first invoices on the project will not come until 2023. So it's anticipated that those BIL funds would be available to pay the first invoices. And then of course, $118,000 will also be available to pay the first invoices. So the adjusted estimated temporary funding that's going to be needed in terms of a borrow is about $470,000. So if the council approves that temporary borrow of, we're saying not to exceed $750,000, just to give us some wiggle room there in case some of these estimates come in over or under, then that 500,000 would, or 500 to 750,000 would be paid off as follows. The 2023 entitlement and the 2023 BIL funds could be applied. So that would total about $309,000. And that would leave a balance of somewhere in the region of 160 to 250,000. And then there's also 2024 BIL funds of 159,000. And then as much entitlement funds as would be needed to cover the remaining balance on this borrow. So again, the request that will come back for action at the next council meeting is to approve a short-term borrow by the airport, not to exceed, $700,000 to be repaid from entitlement and BIL funds by the end of 2024. Any questions that I can try to answer on this item? Mr. Killian.
I have a question. It says here, budget fiscal impact, city debt will increase by up to 700,000. So you're saying $750,000.
So yes, the fiscal impact 700,000 is so that the approval would be up to that amount.
Then you added on 50,000.
Yeah, that was my error. Sorry about that.
So
That's
it's
700,000.
700,000.
Yep.
Okay, then the motion says move to approve a short-term borrow by the airport not to exceed 700,000. And that is a short-term borrow from the city of Platteville. That is not, is that correct?
Yes.
That's not specified in here.
Well,
That is from the city of Platteville.
oh, okay. Yeah, so the airport is a fund of the city. The airport is a part of the city. So it would be paid by funds that are allocated to the airport. So those funds could not be allocated to the city per se, because because they're only eligible for airport projects. But the airport is a segment or portion or division of the city. So yes,
But actually, the monies will be coming from the city.
yes.
Okay,
The temporary borrow has to be
that's what's
authorized.
not clear in this motion.
So
Okay, I apologize that it's not clear. Just to clarify, so the monies of the borrow would be coming from whichever entity loans the money to the city. And those would be used to pay the airport project invoices. And
My
then that,
next question is, the city is going to loan the airport some money. Will all the cost of the loan be paid back to the city?
yes. So the
the
interest
city is
expense on the loan would be a
We're
part
not
of,
going to be paying interest and things like this added on, but we're going to be paid back for all the cost of this loan.
yes, that's correct.
Okay.
okay, and I'm assuming that there will be a bid process. If this is $700,000, I assume that there will be a local bid process with banks or with entities that everybody will have an equal opportunity to bid on this loan.
Yes, so we are working with our bond counsel, but you could basically call them our debt counsel. They are helping us navigate what kind of bonds, not bonds, I should say. It could be a bond or it could be various other instruments, debt instruments that we might use, including possibly requesting proposals from local banks. I think in this interest rate environment, we'll want to go with the vehicle that creates the least interest expense possible. That may or may not be local banks. We would bring those options back to the council when we get to the point where we need to borrow those funds. And I want to point out too, I didn't really bring this forward, but it is just possible based on the timing of the invoices on the project and how the project goes forward, that there may not need to be a borrow at all. It may just be that there's enough airport cash and enough funding coming from the state through these various entitlements and infrastructure bill money that there may not need to be a borrow. So right now we're pursuing the idea of a borrow that would be approved, sort of like a line of credit that would only be drawn down if there was invoices that came in and there wasn't the funding available to pay them. But in any case, whatever the format looks like, it would come back to the council for approval before the borrow is actually made. And all of the costs associated with the borrow would be covered through those airport allocations.
Another question.
Sure.
Why isn't the airport borrowing from the state? They have money for loans. Why are they borrowing from the city?
Well, technically the city is borrowing the money, as you pointed out. And so the airport's not technically borrowing from the city. In the past, there was a loan that was made from like essentially city reserves to the airport that has now been paid off, but that was a different arrangement. So this would be not borrowing from the city, but the city borrowing from a loan from a lender. Why doesn't the airport borrow from the state? I guess the best way I could answer that is that if the airport was to go out and borrow money, it couldn't do that without council approval. That would be a city borrowing. So the airport itself does not have the authority to go and borrow money without council approval.
We could give council approval that they could go to the state.
Yes, you could. And so I'm
We
not
could
sure
do
if you
that.
mean the,
They don't have to take the money, get the money from us.
well, they're not getting it from you per se. The airport and the city are borrowing the money from a lender. But the council could definitely approve borrowing from the states. The only state program I'm familiar with is, oh gosh, what's the name of that fund? Yeah, we used it in the past, and that may be the one you're referencing. And that's definitely an option that we can include to bring back to the council as one of the options for the loan. Yeah, it's some kind of a trust that the state manages that loans money. Sometimes they're not as competitive on interest rates as private lenders, but we can certainly include them.
When I look at previous information about the airport, I mean, their funding is not from the city. They have deep pockets from other places. It's not the city.
That's correct. So those entitlement funds, and now added to that, the BIL funds. So and that is how the majority of this project is going to be paid for. It's just that the timing of those funds, because they come in annual allotments, means that to get the project done, the airport and city would need to borrow temporarily to cover invoices, and then would be able to pay off that debt over where it's estimating a 12-month period.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this request by the Airport Commission to be authorized through the city to borrow money on a short-term basis for their hangar project? Okay, if there's no more questions, that'll be forwarded for action at our next meeting in August, or pardon me, July. Let's not skip July. All right, request for proposal, financial audit advising services. Adam.
Yes, so within the 2022 City of Platteville City
Just a
Goals.
minute.
Oh,
I want to ask the question.
sure.
Ellers is now our financial advisor.
Correct.
Do they have a contract like this already with us?
Yes.
And so they are a possible candidate, firm, vendor, whatever you want to call them.
Yes.
To be in this project. And so I don't remember seeing these 16, 20 pages in previous years.
The RFP. So,
So let's let Adam go forward.
Well,
Yeah.
it just seems like it's a kind of a cookbook thing that was picked up, and there's a thing that's typo sort of thing in here. So I just want to know where all this came from.
sure. Yeah. So we have used this RFP in the past. So this is one that we have utilized in the past when we did our last kind of review, which I think was a couple of years ago. And that's when Ellers was selected as the firm. So just like as you've seen throughout this year, we've been doing multiple RFPs, as that was one of our goals, was to kind of conduct a request for proposals for a variety of our contractual services. So currently, as Ken alluded to, we have a contract with Ellers for the duties of the city's financial advisement. The financial advisor generally assists the city in the analysis, structure, issuance, and management of debt. The financial advisor also may be called upon to provide other financial advisory services, such as the creation of an updated financial plan, which Ellers has done in the past couple of years, bond rating assistance, et cetera. So the main reason we're kind of doing this, the proposal will be evaluated by staff, and then we'll bring a recommendation back to the council in regards to the firms that submit for this. So based on the proposal selected, the cost of the financial advisor services may increase or decrease. We won't know that until we actually get the submissions back. So the draft RFP is basically being provided to the council for information to provide for an opportunity for council feedback. This was actually something we had our city manager intern, who is in attendance tonight, Carol. This is one of the projects that he worked on with Nicola and myself. So this is kind of a combination of an RFP that we have used in the past, as well as looking at what other municipalities have been using. We try to see if there's new things that we want to put in there. So what we're going to be looking for is, this does not have to go to action, but we obviously want council members to take a look at this. And if there's any feedback or changes, or as you indicated, Ken, if there are any typos in here that you found, please send those to me. We'll make those corrections, and then we will get this out on our website. And then what we typically do with these is not only do we put them in the paper, it goes in the Platteville Journal, and then we also utilize the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. That's one of the main areas we put RFPs on, and then we do send them out. So I've already had conversations with Ellers, so they're aware that this is kind of occurring. It's just something that we're going to be doing every 3 years, kind of getting better at getting more standardized and kind of going out and making sure that rates are where they should be, and services are where they need to be. So there you go.
I only have one question.
Yes.
Why is the financial management plan an option? The most valuable thing we have had, in my opinion, in the last 5 years are the financial management plans, not only for the general fund, but also for water and sewer. So it concerns me to see that that is an option, not a requirement. I mean, I think, frankly, I think that that should be front and center. I mean,
I'll, if you don't mind, I
Nope,
can
take it.
tackle that one. So when I was drafting or helping Carol draft this proposal, it didn't actually call out the financial management plan as a separate item. So I wanted to make sure that we understood if there would be a cost associated with compiling that plan. My understanding from Adam actually is that different municipal advisors approach that differently. So some may charge a fee for that and some may not. So I wanted to make sure that our proposals would be comparative apples to apples, that we would understand, because I understood that was an important part of the of what the services were that were received from Ellis, but Ellis did charge or does charge a significant fee for those services. So it's not optional in terms of whether the city would want to have a 5-year plan. We definitely need one. It's something that S&P asks us about every year. But rather that we would make sure that that the proposal, I guess I was phrasing it, maybe it wasn't clear, phrasing it so that it would be separated or carved out by the responding advisors as to how much that piece was going to cost.
Barb, I have a question. Are you,
In a
are
minute.
you
I saw
referring to
just a-
3.2
I'm referring to 4.2.
or 3.2?
3.2 might also be part of it,
Refers to financing plan too.
not the financing plan, because that's the financing plan on a debt structure like we looked at tonight. I'm talking about a financial management plan that shows how much debt we have, how it's being paid off, all of the other things that got us in trouble a few years ago.
So what we could do
And
is,
so I think front and center, this has to have, the way this looks to me as where it's put, it looks like that's an option. Well, maybe we would have that, and maybe what we wouldn't. To me, we had bond counsel and other kinds of stuff before. It was the financial management plan that to me really made the difference in how we, I don't know. Do you agree with that? I do.
If you go to page 5 of the RFP under 3.4 other services. So it says here, perform other services as may be requested by the city at an agreed upon fee, including arbitrage calculations. As a separated cost, your proposal should include an option for your firm to prepare an overall 5-year financial management plan for the city using data provided by city staff. So part of the thought process here was that if so the proposal should include it. If it's not wrapped into the whole price of the services that they are going to submit in terms of their proposals, then if it's an extortionate amount that they want to charge for that piece, then there are other places we could go for a long-range financial plan. And maybe that would be something that would get separated from the municipal advisor services, because the way Ellis gets compensated for what they do is not actually through a contract, but rather through helping us with bond issues. So in the cost of issuing a bond, there's a piece that goes to Ellis. If we never issued a bond and we didn't do a financial management plan, we would never pay $1 to Ellis.
Right.
So that's why, I wanted to try to make sure that we understood what that was going to cost us, rather than getting quoted later on after we'd contracted with that.
I
provider.
understand what you're saying. What I'm saying is, I'm not going to be happy about any contract that doesn't require a financial management plan,
Yes,
not only for our general operations, but for water and sewer.
right. Absolutely.
Actually, on page 6, Nicola, 4.2, it's the optional 5-year financial management plan is listed. The cost proposal should contain pricing information relative to completing a 5-year financial management plan for the city. So it is mentioned again.
But it's an optional.
Yeah, I think the
Yeah, I
difference is we
understand.
need to remove,
I-
we need to
so
remove the word
The
optional.
word option.
The optional.
Be,
But they could include it. They
I
could
mean, you
include it.
can,
Right.
we need a financial management plan. I don't care how you put this in words. If you say,
Yeah.
we want an itemized idea of how much you charge for this and how much you charge for that, that's fine. But when I read the term optional, I think about these alternatives. Oh, we have contract 22-14, and then we have 2214A, and we can take that alternative away. And I don't want to take the alternative of a financial management plan away.
Yeah. So again, I totally agree with you. And the optional is in case we wanted every other service, but we wanted to contract with somebody else for that piece.
That's what I picked up on with
Yeah.
optional.
I mean,
I mean-
I hear that. Okay.
Sorry that it was confusing.
Okay, and so you will get that cleaned up, posted
Yep.
and onto the website. Okay. And this is not this will not come back for action because you will move
Correct.
forward. Okay, item C, information and discussion, award the fire department mobile radio upgrade
Okay.
CIP project. Oops, do
Not-
you have others?
Yes, I do.
Okay. We're going back to the financial management. plan.
Yeah,
Is that where we
well, that's why I questioned at the beginning here,
Okay,
because there's a typo on page 8. And it just stands out that, and so this is section 6, proposal evaluation. It says particularly with lake properties. Well, the typo should be like properties under number 1. I assume that's like. Don't have any lake properties.
Yeah, that's a typo. Sorry about that.
So
Section
that's a
6.
typo. So who, is this a new part of the document that we've gotten from someplace and there's a typo in the thing that you got?
Yes,
Is it?
yes.
This a new addition? Okay. And then cities, it says in the big paragraph, city staff will review. Who among city staff will review all RFPs?
So if we're talking about this specific one, normally that would be myself, that would be Nicola, and then anybody else we would want to go through. The comptroller normally would be in those discussions. It'd be anybody from city staff that has a financial impact with whoever that municipal advisor would be. So primarily that would be, Howard is included in that, obviously with the water and sewer utility, but primarily it would be the 3 of us plus the comptroller.
Okay, then continuing on with that big long paragraph, the last sentence. A proposal will become a part of the agreement once a tentative agreement is prepared, comment will be presented to the common council to award the contract. I would like that wording changed to the common council to accept or reject. In other words, we don't necessarily have to award the contract. I want to be able to accept or reject the contract. And then in the last page, the last paragraph, sentence on page 8, the same thing. In addition to all other rights granted to it under Wisconsin law, the city of Platteville reserves the right to waive formalities in the proposal process, semicolon, to accept or reject any or all proposals. So that goes along with what I gave you there underneath that big paragraph. I want to be able to accept or reject. And then as far as any other additions here, any of this, like section 7, is that new? Is that new? Is this added on?
conditions. the terms and conditions.
Terms and conditions, are these added on? Is this
So I'm
something new?
actually not familiar with the contract or the RFP that was sent out previously. That was before my time. Alice was here before I came. So this is drawn from an RFP template from another municipality. So yes, it's all essentially new.
Well, sometimes when you do that, you get into trouble as far as the wording. Okay, my last question is, how much money hiring the financial advisor, how much money is that going to save? And how much money has it saved in the past so far?
So that we won't know, but I would probably tell you based on experience, it's not going to be a savings, would be my assumption.
What?
It's not, you're not going to see a reduction in their cost, would be my assumption. Again, we won't know that until we actually get the RFP submitted, but just knowing the current climate we're in, I don't think you're going to see anybody submitting a proposal that is going to be less than what was previously. Ellers may, because they've been here, they may try to keep something streamlined with the cost, but just like any other organization, they're dealing with the same inflation issues with staff and with costs and with everything else. So my assumption is we are not going to see a reduction. We may see something flat, or we may actually see an increase because of the fact that just like us, they're experiencing inflation costs in all of their operations that they're dealing with. So I'm not anticipating we're going to see something less.
Financial advisor should be helping us so that our costs can be reduced. Now, financial advisor is not supposed to rely as much upon the employees of the city of Platteville. So we have expertise coming from a financial advisor versus expertise
Right.
lacking on the part of the employees. So the last question I have is that will some employees be let go because we're using the
I would anticipate we're not going to see a reduction in staff.
So wouldn't it be fair to say that one of the advantages of the financial advisor, I mean, we talk about the rating agency, and certainly when Ellers came on and started helping us through these bond issues, I believe our rating went from like whatever to the AA minus. So our savings, so to speak, is in lowered interest costs over time. It's not in, so the savings isn't quantifiable by year, it's quantifiable by issue because of the work they do to get a bond issue. It's just like I said to Brian tonight, bring us good news in August.
Right.
Because it's their work in terms of how they present us and get these things packaged that brings us lower interest rates. So lower interest rates save us money. It's not about staff or things like that. I think,
Yeah,
at least that's my understanding.
No, I mean, essentially the reasons why you have a financial advisor is, and there's 3 or 4 well-known, obviously financial advisors that are in the state of Wisconsin. And primarily to kind of hit on what Barb's indicating, you're not going to see a savings probably in the rate that they're charging you for their services. Where you see the savings is by doing their job. So the more obviously municipal clients that they have and the more bond ratings that they're doing and the more services that they're doing is creating a comfort level with Standard and Poor's and with the rating agencies so that they know, Nicola and I can be the most financial gurus in the world, but at the end of the day, we're going against Standard and Poor's. So to have that financial advisor who is every day in the market, monitoring, all the different ways that they can utilize funding or how you should be, servicing your debt. That's really where you're going to see the savings is, as you kind of indicate, when they come in today, well, we anticipate that your interest rate is going to be this. because of the climate, we're going to recommend you front load all your debt in this debt issue, or, depending on if it's another one, they may tell you to backload it. That's a lot of where their expertise comes in. So it's not really a reduction in staff. It's more of as their company continues to be in the market and showcases that they're going out for clients and getting bond ratings and creating the financial management plans that are helping municipalities. That's a lot of the savings that you're going to see, because that helps with our rating, because we're a partner with them.
So staff doesn't have the expertise.
We have expertise.
but
There's
they
no
don't
question
have the
about that.
necessary complete expertise to do the work.
I would say you don't, it may be more networks.
Well, it's part of that. And it's also part of that, that is a full-time job that they're doing on their own, being in the bond market. We certainly could do that, but that's going to require a staff person, because that's the difference that you're doing, is we are outsourcing that service so that they are the ones that are constantly in the market. If we want to pull that in, that's a full-time person, considering that that's all that person is going to be doing on a day-to-day basis, is looking at the market, looking at running those financial scenarios, those plans. Whereas it's a combination effort from all of us as staff plus the financial advisor to come up with those scenarios.
What does this cost us so far per year? What does it cost us to have Ellers?
So it's a combination of factors. So it depends on obviously how much we are going out and borrowing. So the more you borrow, the more there is in debt issuance costs and everything else, which is a service that they charge. As Nickel alluded to, there are other services that they do charge for. And that's one of the reasons why we're going out for the RFP. Not saying that Ellers isn't doing a good job, but that's kind of why we have this structured this way, because we want to see against some of the companies that are competing against Ellers, if there is a savings that you're alluding to, Ken. There may be some of those other firms, they may not charge for some of these services, such as, they may not charge us separately for a financial management plan because they have that incorporated into their overall costs of when they go out and issue. Some firms don't do that. There are others where we want to compare and see, okay, what is Ellers going to charge us to do the financial management plan compared to firm B, C, D, and F. And that's the question we're going to have to look at as staff to bring a recommendation in front of you to go, all right, although we've definitely been, seems to be very happy with the services Ellers have provided. As we've indicated, there's been some things that they've done for us in the past, but that doesn't mean that another firm may not be able to provide the same service or better service. But that's what we want to look at. We want to see if there are ways that potentially there are cost savings in the debt that they're issuing and the services they're providing. We won't know that until we issue this and find out what the firms are going to propose.
I don't remember having an RFP for Ellers in the beginning, did we?
That was before,
Yeah.
I think so. I think that would probably have been at least
I know we-
8 years ago, 6 years, at least 8 years
I don't
ago.
remember reading this big, long document like this, 16, 20 pages.
No.
I don't know. Okay, let us then move on to the next information discussion item. Award Fire Department Mobile Radio Upgrade CIP project bid. And Adam,
Yes, I'm gonna pinch it here for Ryan because he unfortunately is out with some family stuff, so keep him in your thoughts. But so as part of the 2022 capital improvement plan, the fire department was budgeted $50,000 towards the upgrade of mobile radios. The current radios that are in use are now end of life with the manufacturer and are also non-P25 digital. So this limits our ability to have radio service as well as upgrade our radios to operate in P25 digital to gain increased coverage and clarity. So what he means by that is a lot of the partners that our fire department works with, so obviously the county and some of the other municipalities, they have moved to the P25 digital radios. So there is a lot of issues that they're having in communicating. We've also been having issues, obviously, with the radios in our fire department getting service, just being able to communicate between each other. So in 2021, Grant County announced that they are moving forward with upgrading and expanding the county's radio system to include 11 new or upgraded radio tower sites and installing newer radio system technology. The current radios that we're using are not capable of the new radio system technology, which limits our capabilities and interoperational abilities with other county agencies. We created a bid request with specifications to meet both Platteville's radio systems as well as Grant County's radio system to ensure we could make an upgrade to P25 digital on our radio channel to gain improved range and clarity. The police department and Southwest Health EMS are already on P25 digital, so this will give us the ability to communicate with them on their P25 digital system. We received bids from 4 vendors to upgrade all of our mobile radios. The vendors that submitted bids were ICOM, Raycom, General Communications, and Baycom. We have worked with Raycom, General Communications, and Baycom for various equipment in the past, and they have all been satisfactory in equipment and services they have provided. Due to the requirement that the vendor must be able to provide satisfactory service for the radios we purchase, as radios are critical to the operation of the fire department, we need to ensure that we can have the equipment service in a very short time frame. So one of the things we did look at with the vendors was obviously where is their most, current base of operations, so that if we did need to have something serviced, we certainly could do that.
So where are these bases of?
So ICOM is based out of, they have their most recent, when I looked it up, was Glendale Heights, Illinois. So that's kind of by the Chicago area. Raycom is by Dubuque. So they actually have a Dubuque office. GenCom is national. So I wasn't actually able to pinpoint exactly where it is. And then Baycom has a couple of different facilities. They're in La Crosse, Stevens Point, and then Portage. So those kind of did play into kind of the recommendations. So from the business, the budget and fiscal impact, so the CIP budget is $50,000. As you can see, the bids range from anywhere from $39,026 to $82,476.08. There are additional warranty and service options that are available to provide additional warranty coverage that are not included in the initial bid, but could also be added as the recommended bid award is slightly under budget. So what staff is recommending after talking with the fire department is they are recommending that we award the bid for the FD 0122 to Raycom at a price not to exceed $50,000.
Okay, questions?
So is this coming back next time?
Yes, so this will be coming back next time for action. So if you do have any questions as you're kind of reviewing this, please let me or Ryan know, and we'll do our best to kind of investigate those questions and have them prepared for you.
So is this the total of the bid summary? It says there were additional options for warranty and service. So were those bid too?
No, so that was not. So that was something that we did not bid with that. That's separate. So that's why we're requesting with Raycom, their bid for the radios that we wanted was $46,665.64. And because that's under budget, what we would like to do is look at different ways that we can ask them for warranty to get to the $50,000 to try to have better utilization and better warranty options. So that certainly is something that we don't have, the council does not have to award. You can certainly award just the $46,655.64. But we thought by asking for what was in the budget and what we have in there to give us some flexibility to kind of work with Raycom on some potentially warranty options. That's why we're asking for the award not to exceed the $50,000.
Okay, go ahead.
Do we know, Adam, if the other bids include warranties and service, whatever that was called, warranty and service options?
They did not. So
They do not. So they're all the same in that. respect.
correct. So that does not right. The bids are basically for the radios.
Okay.
And then in conversations with the potential of our recommendation, we asked about warranty options since it was under, and that's why we're asking, potentially what that could be. I certainly can have Ryan prepare kind of what are some of the warranty options, and we can present that at the next meeting. So you guys can kind of see what, we're proposing. I'll make sure that we have that in there.
Okay, also, could he include, it just says radios. Is this for 10 radios? Is this for 5 radios? Is this for 55 radios? We need kind of the number of radios that were included in each bid. I don't know if that was in the bid document. I also see that there are 4 different vendors for radios in addition to vendors. So there are ICOM radios, which must be a brand. There are Tate radios. There are 2 different kinds of Kenwood radios, and there are Motorola radios. So the recommendation is Raycom and these Tate radios. Part of the justification is the interoperability with the county. Can we have information about these radio? Has anybody checked on these radios? I don't know about.
I guess I would make the assumption that, you know, the fire department personnel would be experts in their
this
area
radio.
and certainly would not go for wanting to purchase something that's inadequate. And I think they're the subject, you know, they're the subject experts with it. So I want to have a little bit of faith in what's going on. there.
To answer your question, Barb, I do know when I asked Chief Simmons, they did actually test out all of these
All these
different
radios.
versions. So that was one of the things that they did when they got the bid is they had, so Raycom actually came and let them borrow the radios that they were able to use. So that kind of went into the, as Todd's alluding to, one of the things that they kind of did in the interview process was either talk to somebody that looked at a version of what it is to see the compatibility. So I know that came up.
And the compatibility with the county,
Right.
because that's been an issue.
That has been an issue.
Well, it's, yeah.
Also says the police department of Southwest Health EMS are already on the P25. Is that correct, Doug? Okay.
And I'm sure that this would have been a little different if Ryan could have been here tonight and he would have been able to answer those questions. Okay. If anybody has any other questions about radios and this radio system, get those to Adam so he can get them to Ryan before our next meeting. Otherwise, we'll be looking at this as a move to an action item also. All right, let's move on to the resolution requesting city staff to be permitted to serve and sell fermented malt beverages at designated events.
That's right.
Bob.
Yes.
Adam.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, the headline or the title kind of lays it out there for you. We are coming for the council for a request for a resolution for the city staff to be able to permitted to sell fermented beverages at designated city events. The city staff is continuing looking for opportunities to enhance a variety of activities for all ages in a fiscally responsible and prudent way. Although the focus of our Parks and Rec department is clearly on the youth, it's important to include enhanced enjoyment for adults as well. At the June 2nd License Committee meeting, city staff presented a proposal for city staff to be permitted to serve and sell fermented beverages, beer, seltzer, malt beverages at designated city-run events. This request also was presented to the Parks Force Recreation Committee and the Brodsky Center Committee as well. All supported this resolution. Examples of such events could be the 4th of July celebration, a Chamber of Commerce event, a Battle of the Bands, a city-sponsored league or tournament, or travel league events. City staff would not be serving, making this clear, city staff would not be serving during normal park activities, nor during the PYDS games and leagues or tournaments. The rec department is in the process of restarting an adult co-ed Sunday slow pitch league. This league will run, our plan is to run it September through November. City staff is aware of previous issues with serving alcohol during the slow pitch leagues. So we intend to be very cautious and vigilant in serving. We have also recommended some limitations, and they're actually in the resolution as well. Only to be sold by department employees who are properly licensed with the operator's license. Only in strict compliance with state and federal law, of course. Only in the timeframes from 1 to 8 p.m. and only during the designated event. Also only in aluminum cans, no carry-in purchase malt beverages, and they must be consumed in the park. Only during designated events approved by the city manager and the Parks and Rec director. Also want to note, it's not in your notes, but we have talked to the chief of police as well and reviewed all this with him as well. So that has actually had that conversation already. The minimal impact for a budget, actually, they'll probably be in a very positive revenue increase. And we would recommend as a staff that we be able to do that. I'm sure you have some questions.
Okay, questions about city staff being able to offer beer and malt beverages. That doesn't, it's just beer, right? Beer, seltzer, and malt beverages. So no hard liquor, no wine.
Right.
Okay. And only in aluminum cans and only at designated events. Okay, questions?
What were some of the previous issues with the slow pitch league?
Obviously, it was before my time, but I think it was mostly because they carried in. They allowed them to carry in, and that's going to be strictly regulated. I don't know how they got to carry in. I'm sure it was not permitted, but they just kind of did it. And I think that's why one of the reasons why we actually want to be able to sell, because we'll know that beer, our beer, that is there. And it does give them, an opportunity to have a beer while they're playing. Our discussion was, as I said, be very vigilant. It's 2 at a time. It's kind of expensive, $5 a can, it's just so they have a beer, they can play. And it's during their event and only during their event.
And it would be, Kathy, you have a question on your forehead.
Yes.
I can. read that question.
So one question, are you talking about city staff serving like from the concession stand at Legion Field?
Correct.
Because I kind of look at this,
So
and it's like it could be anywhere.
It could be.
Are you
So
going to set up a table in a park and sell beer?
The
Because-
plan would, if we sell at the Legion, we will have the designated window and a designated area. And that was, so it'll be only, and when we say staff, we're talking about myself and Adam Bartles. I mean, that we're going to be very limited and see how this goes. But we would be doing it out of that. The other,
Might do it out of the Broski too.
that was, yeah. So right now there's 3 staff. Well, there's 1 staff member that has their operator's license. Hi.
oh, wait, now we have 3.
Now you have 3.
That'll help.
But what we talked about to kind of indicate where you allude to, Kathy, is why we open this up to the possibility of having it in other places is potentially the Broski Center is a location where if the city was running an event, like, we're possibly looking at, working with our economic development partners and kind of doing some different things. So having the ability as the city and having the operator's license, there's the opportunity to do that. But really, we are mainly focused on this being very park centric events. So as you indicated, if it's 4th of July and for whatever reason, we're not able to find somebody that can run it, hey, there's an opportunity. We have city staff that potentially could fall into that. We obviously want to work with the majority still of volunteer groups because that is one of their big kind of fundraisers. So this isn't something where we're looking as the city to kind of take anything over. It's just opening a window where, as we continue to look at revenue opportunities or streams that make sense, could we do that? We're not going to prop up a table at Smith Park and start, it has to be something that makes sense. So whether that's, City Park where there's an event going on and potentially there's an opportunity to partner with that, we would obviously look at that. But within that, we're going to make sure we do the proper diligence and not only that, have the conversations with the licensing and alcohol committee, as well as the chief to make sure, we're not doing something that.
Okay, so if this is approved, does each of those events have to come back to the council, or is it just sort of a blanket, okay, if you're going to do it, these are the guidelines?
Right. It has to be approved right now by either Bob or myself as the park and rec director of the city. manager.
So,
And that's in the resolution.
And
That
that's in the
wording is
resolution.
in the resolution.
Bob and yourself,
Correct.
Correct.
not either or.
No.
No.
Both.
Yes.
Bob's gonna be serving the beverage.
But unless he has a license, as of right now, I would be the one that would have to serve.
Right, except for right now, yeah.
But
But yes,
as far as you can also have to be observing the people, because I know some people can drink 1 beer and 2 beers, they're goners as far as how they behave. And so that's to me, that's what's gonna come up, because you don't know what they're gonna be like when they get 2 or 3.
I agree. And that's why.
Which is one of the reasons when it came to the licensing committee, that, Bob said you can't buy more than 2 at a time. So nobody can come up and say, give me 12 beers.
Oh, but they can come back.
But if,
They can send somebody else.
right, well, you're right. They can
True.
send somebody else.
That was my question. How are these limitations gonna be manned? Like, how are they gonna be? If you're at a
Yeah.
park, how are you gonna know if it's just 2 of you guys back there, one serving, one giving? Who's gonna know what's going on with Jim Bob and them?
So,
Ben,
I mean, yeah, legitimately, it is so having just gone through the operator training, I can tell you it is very much the responsibility of whoever is selling that. That's on you. So that is my role as an operator, is I have to monitor that. So to Ken's point, if I give somebody, 2 beers and then literally within 5 minutes, they're back at my, they're back and they go, oh, I want 2 more. Per my operator's license, I'm supposed to go, it's supposed to cause me question. That doesn't mean I can't serve them, but now that creates, in the training, it's the red flag. It's you start to go, okay, you maybe do that, but then you're probably, if they come back 5 minutes later again and go, I want 2 more, it's your responsibility to say, you need to slow down.
I guess what I'm wondering is, does that mean at these events, you're gonna have to have police staff and security staff and or?
It's definitely something we'll have to monitor, and that's the conversations, obviously that Bob had with Chief McKinley in regards to it. It's something that it's going to be a trial process we're going to have to monitor. And obviously, if we're seeing that it's a problem, we're going to back off. And as long as it is, everybody's following the rules and the regulations, we expect it'll go off without a hitch. But if there are, we're going to pivot and do what we need to do to make sure that it is still being safe.
And Doug, I do believe that when we had, I'm going to say, drinking from the trunk, because isn't that, I recall these discussions a few years ago when there were these, they would bring their coolers and they wouldn't put them out, but then they would all go and drink from the trunk. And I think you had some incidents at that point because it wasn't regulated. Yeah. But
Oh,
Well, I have a question for the chief of police.
he's gonna speak here just a minute.
That's
Go
an
ahead.
accurate statement, and coolers would find their way into the dugouts, and without it being regulated, it was more of a problem.
Now, Ken, your question of the chief.
My question is, will there be a police presence at the events?
Periodically, yes.
Yes. So that theoretically, well, not theoretically, but some police members may recognize some of these individuals that come. And they must have experience with the ones that go to the different bars, Second Street, et cetera, with some individuals.
Sure. You have a different crowd, though.
Has there been consideration in terms of like monitoring for underage drinking? Because I'm assuming with the softball league, it's probably 18 and older. So there might be some underage people there too.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the training that, if you're old enough, you hate being carded. It depends, you may be flattered. But the thing we definitely will make sure is that we will card, to try to get away from that, you card. It's the rule of thumb. I mean, when I used to bartend and do everything, you card anybody and you just tell them that's part of my operator's license. I have to make sure, I can see that you're probably well over, 21, but to be safe, I'm going to do this.
And I guess I just need to make the comment that I totally understand all the questions about monitoring, maybe a police presence occasionally or whatever. But how many times do we approve these permits for parties, for wine walk, for whatever? Are we sign off on them? I mean, some of those same questions could come back. And maybe we need to, not that I don't want to make trouble where there's not trouble,
Right.
But you're right on the money
if
there.
we're saying that we have concerns because maybe the city's gonna do it, then
I think
what
that's
about
where-
everybody else
That's
that
what
gets these
concerns me.
permits
Yeah.
that,
Because I guess I'm just wondering like liability from a citywide. Because I'm assuming that the people that apply for permits, liability lies with them.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's no different as the operator. So first it falls on me. It falls on whoever the operator is that is serving. That's their responsibility. That's why they have that license. That license says that they have gone through the proper training to be able to do that. And then just like you said, it'd be no different than if it goes up the chain, then we have obviously liability insurance to cover, various instances that we hope don't occur, but may occur.
I was just gonna say, I think it's a great idea. It's an excellent idea. It formalizes the alcohol that's up in the park. How many times we signed off on these things already? Every Roman Catholic church from here to Alaska has these things and seems not to have a problem. However, I've been called to a few in the past, but very few. So what an excellent idea. And hopefully for the $5, we'll get the larger cans of beer.
We'll see what we can do.
Just my request.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be a moneymaker, right?
Yes, it is.
I should get out there.
Okay, any other questions? And this is not for youth sports. This is.
No.
Correct.
Okay, let's go on then. So that'll come back to us for action at the next meeting. Let's go on then to the 2023 proposed budget timeline. And before we do that, I don't know if you all got your mail today and if you all get the municipality magazine, but the whole magazine
Oh, yeah.
this time is dedicated to finance and budget. And as I took a quick read through that as to how people, I just take a quick read through that, and you'll see that we're far ahead of some people in the things we're doing already. But it does, this budget timeline that we're looking at tonight certainly is, I would say, reiterated in that magazine. So we are not the only municipality that at this point is looking at budget. All right, Nicola.
Yeah. So as you've aptly pointed out, it is that time of year. We are getting into budget full swing. And this is the timeline that we're proposing. We wanted to bring it to council's attention so that you can take a look at those dates. If you see any, conflicts where that there's something else that we've missed that means that we couldn't have these meetings on these dates, then please let us know. This year, I have highlighted the meetings that will affect some or all council members. So that would be the blue ones for the Water and Sewer Commission, the orange ones or tan ones for the Airport Commission, and the yellow ones for the council. And the asterisks represent those meetings that are not regularly scheduled council meetings, but are special meetings for budget purposes. Other than that, does anybody have any questions or comments on the timeline?
I would just ask council members at this time to make sure and add meetings for Tuesday, August 16th, which is not a second or fourth Tuesday. For Tuesday, October 4th, which is not a second or fourth Tuesday, and for Tuesday, October 18th. It appears we'll be talking about budget every Tuesday in October.
That's right.
So while
excited.
yesterday was National Sunglass Day, maybe we can name October
National Budget Month.
City
Budget
Budget
Month.
Month. Okay, anybody with questions? And it appears that the meetings will all be scheduled at 6. Is that correct?
Correct.
All meetings will be scheduled at 6, just like our council meetings.
Yes, and I notice on here that the tentative council review session on October 25th says 5 p.m. So I
5 p.m.
apologize for that, but we can change that to 6. The last couple of years, we have not actually needed that. So optimistically, perhaps we will not need it again this year.
Hey, Ken?
Put that in a different color.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We'll put that, we'll put it in the red going forward.
but you need to pencil it in just in
Here,
case.
but no.
Okay, Ken.
I'd like to submit something for CIP. How soon should I do that?
You are working on CIP. Your department heads
Yep.
have some.
We're gonna be
One.
starting that in
Week one.
about a month, well, about a week here. So actually, after the 4th of July, I'll be sending it out to all the department heads. So if you have something and you want it included, send it to me.
in week 1 of July.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions, comments, or motions?
Motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn, yeah.
All right, we have a motion by Eileen and a second by Ken to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I
Meeting's
don't
adjourned.
oppose those.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. And as Kathy pointed out, there are plenty of opportunities coming up this next Monday for the 4th of July, and there are still volunteer slots.